us to do Stingo. Before that, we couldn't make it because it is matured, sometimes for a year, sometimes for 10 months, in oak whiskey vats, somewhere where the temperature has to be absolutely constant. It's not about how cold it is, it's about not moving. And it has to be humid and damp because it has to be matured in oak barrels. And oak barrels will dry out, at least on the outside, and they will leak. So to do that, you have to have a special place. You have to have a brewery conditioning cellar. And microbrewers do not have that because most microbrewers are in industrial units and tin sheds. And great, fair dues to them. And people like Carlsberg don't have cellars anymore, which is why they have ammonia plants to cool their beer. So when we moved back to Northampton, one of the wonderful things in the cellars of the Kingswell Road Albion Brewery is a conditioning tunnel. Damp as hell, full of spiders and creepy things. You wouldn't want to spend too long down there. I sometimes occasionally forget and leave paper lists down there. You come back the next day and they're all crinkled up. Really humid. It never changes down there. That enabled us to do Stingo. And as the gentleman there said, what Stingo is, it's a barley wine. It's a very, very strong beer. Usually very dark, very malty, very sweet. But what makes it a Stingo is the maturation in oak whiskey casks. And this beer is matured for 10 months in a mixture of Dura whiskey casks and American bourbon casks. And the two things produce a different flavor. And that is almost part of what makes the beer its character. Lots of other brewers do, well, some other brewers do barley wines, but only us and Tadcaster can do and do Stingo. Now, Phipps NBC, to give us our full family name, is amalgamation of two companies, NBC and Phipps and Sons. And Phipps themselves used to do just barley wine, called Number 10, but NBC did a Stingo. And time is the other thing that you have to have, because it has to sit in that casks, soaking in the whiskey, soaking in the brandy, soaking in whatever that cask was in. And you can only use those casks 3 or 4 times before you have to move them on. And luckily, we have got time. So we have a tunnel and a time, and we can do it. And that makes it special. So both these beers are particular to us, particular to Northampton, and you don't get them elsewhere. Moving back to the IPA, it's all about difference and knowledge. There are many IPAs now on the market. And some of the online comments we get about our IPA is, it's not really an IPA. That's because the pendulum of taste has moved on. In the way that the British public's taste for chili and garlic and curry has moved since the Second World War. My parents would run a mile like Vampire from Sunlight for curry. And the idea of Peter Kay, like garlic, bread. And it's the same with hops. We're used to having more flavors in our beer now. And this is one of my little proud boasts, I say with a twinkle in my eye. There's a little bit of Phipps DNA in every microbrewed beer in the world today. And I know the other microbrewers here kind of go, when I say that. But I'll tell you why. When Watney's took over Phipps and ran it down, as we've already heard, and Carlsberg moved in, some of the workforce went on and became Carlsberg workers, which is why I started this by expressing my sympathy. And there are still guys who work at Carlsberg who were Phipps workers, just about a small handful of them. And some went off. Dusty Miller went off to Ruddles, which is where our link with Oakham and Ruddles came, who was the head brewer. But his deputy, who was the last head brewer for 18 months, was a guy called Bill Urquhart. And Bill was a pugnacious little chap, looked a little bit like Captain Mannering, and he was a passionate believer in real ale, passionate believer that particularly Phipps beers were the best beers you could possibly have. And he spent a long time trying to convince Watney's not to stop brewing Phipps IPA, because he thought it's fantastic beer. And he failed. And what he did then, he changed the world. It's given to very few of us to change the world, but he did it. So in 1974, he took his redundancy money from Watney Man, and he started the world's first microbrewery in Lichborough in 1974. Any people here had a pint of Lichborough going back? this is not part of history, but an amusing story which some of the old Phipps guys told me. In the last few days, when the brewery was just about to be knocked down on Bridge Street, Bill had a Ford Anglia estate. And in the morning, that Ford Anglia estate would come through the gate with its springs riding high, and Bill would park it in his private parking space. And then the day would happen. Then every evening when Bill went home, that car was grinding on the cobbles. Basically, he nicked half the gear from Watney's because they didn't really need it. And he built it into a shed in Lichborough. So May 1974, first pint of real ale microbrew beer in the world. Now, he wasn't just the first by date, and other people around the world did it. Bill, because CAMRA was just starting at that point, became the consultant to the campaign to brew ale. He was the brewing consultant. And every summer and every holiday, he opened his brewery up for people to come and have brewing holidays. And he taught people how to brew beer. And he taught all the first generation of British microbrewers who then went home to Manchester and Leeds and London and started doing it again. And Bill was the consultant. Sometimes he even designed their kits, because at that point there was no industry to support microbrewing. When we rebuilt the Albion Brewery, we could choose from 20, 30 people producing kit. Bill and his partner, Frank Kenner, his business partner, built it out of old Watney kit, out of washing machine parts. They welded stuff together. They worked out how it would need to work on a small scale. And so that second generation of brewers trained the third generation, and then they became professors. And people came from America to work at Bill's place. And the beer he trained them to brew was Phipps IPA, which is a very hoppy beer. And now hoppiness is valued and prized all around the world. And we, here in Northamptonshire, via Bill, have our little part to play because of the shoe industry, because of the First World War, because of Pickering Phipps. It's a lovely little thread that goes through the beers. So the other thing I suppose I should speak, because it's how it was billed, is sunshine and rain. I don't know any older gentlemen here if that name actually means anything. It certainly did to me, because my grandfather, I had two grandfathers, surprisingly enough. One grandfather was a brewer at Prades in Wellingborough. The other grandfather just drank an awful lot of beer. He was a shoe worker. Jim Neville, my grandfather. And what he drank was sunshine and rain, which is another particular Northamptonshire thing. You have a pint of IPA, which is the sunshine, which is your golden beer. And then you buy, it was then a nip, which is about the size of a baby sham bottle of Stingo. And you settle down with your pack of Woodbines in the pub and club. And you take 3 or 4 slugs of IPA, and then you open your nip of Stingo and you top it up. And then you take another few slugs, and then you top it up. And then gradually you go from a session beer, throughout the end of the night, you're drinking a 9.5% barley wine with a little bit of Phipps in it. So that is sunshine and rain, a beer cocktail. I don't think if you go into many pubs and order a sunshine and rain, they'd know what you mean. But there is one pub that still would, and I urge you to go there if you value history and stories at all, the Bell in Findon. And I'll tell you the other story about that is, it's run by a guy called Dennis Wilmot, who is about 83, 84 now. And when I was first selling Phipps IPA around Northamptonshire, 2008, saying, it's coming back, we're bringing this beer back, I'd go into pubs. I went into the Bell in Findon, and there was Dennis behind the bar. And I said, we're bringing Phipps IPA, here's a bottle of it, and you can order it again. And his first words were, about bloody time. I've been waiting 40 years for this. Dennis was a Watney Man landlord in the late 60s, and he was part of a deputation of Northampton landlords that went to the brewery to say, do not stop brewing IPA, you idiots. But Watneys didn't listen. So Dennis knows what sunshine and rain is. I don't know if anyone else does. And I suppose at this point, because we're running behind time, all I should do is offer you a sample. Yes? Now, do we want to mix it with the IPA, or do we just want to sample the Stingo, which is a particular and special beer? I'm probably going to put this down and stop now, so if there's a camera and this is going live, it's going to be very boring. It's going to be the sound of people going... So, shall I just do a lot of little tots of Stingo? Is that what we want? That's what we want. That's probably my story. I could go on. You want me to go on?